Welcome back. This is WION Speed. Let's get you all the top stories we are tracking at this hour. The Israeli authorities will release at least 42 Palestinian prisoners shortly under the truce deal. Meanwhile, on the same day, Hamas will also free at least 14 Israeli hostages. And the Israel-Hamas truce deal is the first break of war in over 7 weeks. And as per reports, the 4-day ceasefire is expected to see the exchange of at least 150 Palestinian prisoners, and this in exchange of at least 50 Israeli hostages held by Hamas since 7th of October. A convoy of trucks carrying humanitarian aid crossed into Gaza from Egypt through the Rafah border crossing. The second day of the Israel-Hamas ceasefire, on Friday, aid reached northern Gaza, which is the focus of Israel's ground offensive. For the first time in over a month, a United Nations convoy delivered flour to 2 facilities, sheltering people displaced by fighting. Now, the UN said that the pause enabled it to scale up the delivery of food, water and medicine to the largest volume. The UN also said that the Palestinian Red Crescent Society were also able to evacuate 40 patients and family members from a hospital in Gaza City to a hospital in Khan Yunis.
Between Gaza and Israel.
Firecrackers lit up the sky in West Bank as people celebrate the release of Palestinian women and children from Israeli prisons. Under a pact of truce between Israel and Gaza, a total of 39 prisoners were released by Israeli authorities in order to pause the war in the Gaza Strip after 13 hostages from Israel had been handed over. Crowds across the West Bank cheered and waved Palestinian and Hamas flags. The freed detainees included 15 male teenagers detained on the charges of stone pelting and supporting terrorism. Now, the released detainees also include 24 women, some of whom had been jailed over attempted attacks against Israeli forces and other accused of incitement on social media. Pro-Palestinian demonstrators organized protest rallies in Chicago, Illinois and Los Angeles, California on Black Friday. The protesters shamed shoppers at stores, accusing them of supporting Israel, and they raised slogans of "Shut it down for Palestine" and "Shame on you" at shoppers. Now, the protesters also accused U.S. President Joe Biden of being complicit in what they called Israel's genocide against Palestinians in Gaza. Around 15,000 people have been killed in Gaza and 1,200 Israelis killed since the 7th of October. Uttarakhand's Chief Minister Pushkar Singh Dhami arrived at the helipad near a tunnel collapse site in India's Uttarakhand state, and this as the efforts to rescue 41 workers trapped inside the collapsed tunnel are set to resume. Now, as per the latest plan, the rescue teams plan to go ahead with vertical drilling by manual methods to rescue the trapped workers, and the decision comes after the continuous failure of the auger drill. The auger machine will now be used to push the pipes into the debris instead of drilling. And the authorities have also taken the decision to go ahead with manual drilling. Polling has begun for 199 assembly seats in India's western state of Rajasthan, and the race is between the incumbent Congress government against India's ruling Bharatiya Janata Party. A plethora of smaller parties and independent candidates are contesting as well, and several key leaders, including Chief Minister Ashok Gehlot and former CM Vasundhara Raje, have cast their vote. Now, the high-stake battle comes ahead of 2024 general elections, and elections are being contested by 1,862 candidates, and a significant 52.6 million people are set to vote, a lot of them being young voters. Prime Minister Narendra Modi on Friday undertook a sortie on the Tejas aircraft and said that the experience has bolstered his confidence in the country's indigenous capabilities. Taking to social media platform X, PM Modi said, "Successfully completed a sortie on the Tejas and the experience was incredibly enriching, significantly bolstering my confidence in our country's indigenous capabilities and leaving me with a renewed sense of pride and optimism about our national potential." Earlier today, PM Modi landed in Bengaluru and visited the Hindustan Aeronautics Limited. After successfully launching its first spy satellite, North Korea's supreme leader Kim Jong-un examined the photos taken by the new satellite, and Kim inspected the major target regions, and these include South Korean capital of Seoul and other cities that host the US military bases. Kim examined the photos along with other pictures taken of some areas within North Korea, and this was during his visit to the control center of the National Aerospace Technology Administration in Pyongyang on Friday. The launch was first reported by officials in South Korea and Japan. They could not immediately verify whether a satellite has been placed in the orbit, and later South Korea also suspended part of a military agreement it signed with Pyongyang in 2018. Derek Chauvin, the former Minneapolis police officer who was convicted in the murder of George Floyd in 2020, has been stabbed and injured in prison. A person familiar with the matter informed the media about the stabbing incident. On November 24th, Chauvin was stabbed by another inmate at the Federal Correctional Institution in Tucson. In 2020, Derek Chauvin knelt down on George Floyd's neck for more than 9 minutes, who was handcuffed. And the video of Floyd's murder went viral and sparked widespread protests around the US and across the globe against racism and police brutality. Normalcy returns in Dublin after vandalism on the streets. Irish Prime Minister said that it is safe to be in the city and there is a heavy police presence on the ground. Now, in the aftermath of unrest, 34 people have been arrested by the police for rioting triggered by stabbing of 5 people, including 3 children. And the Irish police has blamed far-right agitators for starting the violence after a small group of anti-immigrant protesters arrived at the scene of the stabbing beside O'Connell Street and clashed with police personnel.
I think this is Irish.
7 years after the signing of a peace agreement between the Colombian government and the guerrillas, a former president and Nobel Peace Prize winner Juan Manuel criticizes President total peace plan that aims to end the ongoing fighting between the security forces, guerrillas, paramilitaries and drug gangs. Santos said that if the agreement we signed with the guerrilla is not implemented, then any other attempt at peace is stillborn. Ukraine continues to hold its ground against the year-long Russian invasion. Nearly 2 years into the Russian invasion of Ukraine, instead of common crossing points between the two countries, there are now military positions. Now, as winter approaches, the majority of soldiers holding this military position will be facing their second year enduring the cold weather and snow. However, they express that they have grown accustomed to it and it does not impact their morale. The trenches are equipped with a wood-burning stove and soldiers collect chalk wood to keep warm. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi and visiting French Foreign Minister Catherine co-chaired 6th meeting of China-France high-level dialogue in Beijing. Both Paris and Beijing agreed to implement the important consensus reached by the two heads of the state and take the 60th anniversary of the establishment of diplomatic ties between the two countries. After the meeting, both the foreign ministers jointly witnessed the signing of cooperation documents on education, scientific research, culture and tourism, and health between China and France in 2024. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and leaders of the European Union capped a two-day summit on Friday with visit to the landmark Signal Hill. Trudeau gave European Council President Charles Michel and European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen a tour of the site, which sits atop the capital of the Newfoundland and Labrador province on the Atlantic Ocean. Now, Justin Trudeau also announced plans to send 11,000 assault rifles and ammunition to war-torn Ukraine. The summit addressed issues such as Ukraine, the Gaza war, and joint action on climate change. Russia claims it repelled Ukrainian attacks in multiple directions in the past week, while Ukraine claims that its forces hit concentrations of Russian troops, weapons and military equipment in the last 24 hours on November 24th. Russian Defense Ministry said that its armed forces inflicted 31 group strikes with unmanned aerial vehicles on Ukrainian military airfield infrastructure as well as fuel bases from November 18th to November 24th. Now, Ukrainian forces claim that it repelled more than 60 Russian assaults on the axes of Bakhmut and Maryanka in eastern Ukraine. Pakistan's former Prime Minister Imran Khan moves the Supreme Court for bail in the Al-Qadir Trust corruption case. And according to a media report, Khan and his wife are accused of receiving land worth billions of dollars as a bribe from real estate tycoon. Imran Khan, who is in Rawalpindi jail since September 26 in various cases, moved to the Apex Court on November 24th following rejection of his plea by the Islamabad High Court on November 14th. Japan has detected the first case of highly pathogenic H5 type bird flu this season. And according to the public broadcaster, the first case was detected by a poultry farm in the southern part of the nation. And now the local government in Japan's Saga Prefecture is expected to cull about 40,000 birds on the same farm. Further, Prime Minister Fumio Kishida will convene relevant cabinet ministers to discuss measures to prevent spreading of the virus. Hundreds of women marched in the Chilean capital, Santiago, marking the International Day for Elimination of Violence Against Women. The UN-designated day is observed on 25th of November and falls right before the 16-day protest against gender violence. And as per reports, women in Latin America faced some of the world's highest levels of gender violence against women. Scores of demonstrators supported various causes, including marking the 50th anniversary of the Chile coup. Now, a faction of the protesters also extended support to Palestinians amid the ongoing Israel-Hamas war. In Australia's New South Wales state, climate change protesters held a demonstration to disrupt operations at the country's biggest coal export port. Now, climate activist group Rising Tide, which claimed responsibility for the action, said that protesters were in the shipping channel near the port of Newcastle as part of a 30-hour blockade set to run until Sunday, November 26th. Now, the blockade was comprised of a flotilla of kayaks and people on surfboards from the group, which carried out an unlawful protest near the same port in April when 50 activists were charged by police. Australia is the world's second biggest exporter of thermal coal behind Indonesia, and climate change remains a divisive issue in the country. A substantial lava flow was evident in Italy's Sicily region, and snow-covered slopes of Mount Etna erupted into lava. Authorities have issued a flight alert, adding the international airport that remained unaffected by the volcanic activity. Now, Mount Etna is one of the world's most active volcanoes. As temperatures in non-China have continued to drop, massive ice floes have appeared over the Yellow River, creating magnificent winter scenery in Maui County, which is in northwest China's Qinghai province. Ice jams typically occur in a section of the Yellow River during the early winter. As the river has just begun to freeze, the ice floes look like pieces of glass scattered over jade-like water, and you can hear the sound of them scraping against each other as the river flows. It's still a month until Christmas, but crowds in Hong Kong are already immersing themselves in a festive atmosphere under a giant Christmas tree unveiled on Friday. A massive tree standing in a newly developed art and culture district in West Kowloon with a Christmas-themed village around it, and set up by the Hong Kong Tourism Board. The tree's twinkling lighting with a star tree topper add an extra dazzle to the Hong Kong skyline. The first day of the display not only attracted visitors from abroad, but also Hong Kong's locals looking for Christmas-themed photos. According to organizers, Hong Kong Tourism Board, it took more than 2 weeks to set up the tree and decorate the village. The Christmas tree is open to visitors until January 1st. Lawyers for former Binance CEO Changpeng Zhao are urging a U.S. judge to reject the request to bar him from returning to the United Arab Emirates until he's sentenced for violating anti-money laundering requirements. Zhao's lawyers have asked U.S. District Judge Richard Jones in Seattle not to reverse bail conditions set by a magistrate judge that would allow him to leave the U.S. while awaiting sentencing. Now, Zhao, a citizen of the UAE and Canada, stepped down as CEO of Binance on Tuesday after pleading guilty to willfully causing the global cryptocurrency exchange to fail to maintain an effective anti-money laundering program. No one is prophet in their land or on their land, including European Central Bank President Christine Lagarde. Now, the central bank Sarina admitted on Friday that her son lost almost all of his investments in crypto assets despite copious warnings. And she has long railed against cryptocurrencies, calling them speculative, worthless, and a tool often used by criminals for illicit activity. She also told a town hall with students in Frankfurt, and I quote her here, "He ignored me royally, which is his privilege." Argentine former central banker Luis Caputo is front-runner to be the new economy minister. Reports also suggest that he met local and international bank officials on Friday to lay out the economic plans of President-elect Javier Milei. And the meeting comes as Milei, who has pledged shock therapy for the embattled economy, races to put together his economic team. However, signs that libertarian outsider Milei is leaning towards a more orthodox economic team and policies have spurred markets this week. Bonds are almost up by 14% and equities over 40% since he won a runoff election last Sunday.